Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Rigo Villa. I'm one of the community managers on the Cisco Learning Network, and I'll be your host today. In this session, we're going to be covering ISE integration with Splunk with our speaker and presenter, Pavan Gupta. But before we get started, I wanted to share a couple of quick housekeeping notes. First, I want to let everyone know that this session will be recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing within approximately 5 business days after today. And we do have the link to where you can find the recording in our Slido resources on the left-hand side of your Slido screen. So feel free to take the link from there, or you can also have the links that are displayed on the screen here in front of you. Um, Also, one thing that I want to note is that um, we will be launching. Excuse me for 1 minute. So this will be in an interactive session, and during the live event, our audience is going to use Slido to participate in our live polls. They're going to be able to ask questions to our panelists for your Q&A, and then also you're going to be able to participate in our post-event survey. One important thing to note about the poll questions and Q&A is that they are exclusive to the live audience. So if we are catching this session on demand at a later time, the Slido will not be active for you. So it's just something to keep in mind as you watch this session later on. I also want to let our attendees know about our upcoming webinar coming up in 2025. In our first session of the new year, we are going to be covering ISE as a common policy context hub. That's going to be on Thursday the 9th. And we do invite you to join us for this session if you haven't done so already. The link to how to register can be found on the Slido screen under the resources left-hand pane. So feel free to register at your earliest convenience. And we look forward to seeing you there next month. And without any further delay, I am now going to introduce our speaker, Pavan Gupta, to get us started. So Pavan, if you're ready, please take it away.
Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Rigo. Thanks a lot, folks. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Pavan Gupta. I'm a technical marketing engineer working for Cisco Identity Services Engine. So today, our topic is about integrating Cisco Identity Services Engine with the Splunk. Now, with that, I wanted to actually cover this the session with this kind of an agenda. When I started off exploring the Splunk, I wanted to learn more about the Splunk. I wanted to gather more information about the Splunk. I want to share the experience that I have, what I got till today, and I wanted to share such kind of an experience with you guys. With that, I wanted to give you an overview. Whoever doesn't know what exactly Splunk is, I wanted to give you an understanding of what overview of Splunk is. And we will also actually let you know how do you install the Splunk on a different platforms with all different capabilities. And then we will dive into the integrations part of it. Basically, we have 4 integrations lined up along with the demo. So stay on. Let's look into the overview of Splunk. So the Splunk started off with a point in mind, build anything platform. It's basically Splunk is going to gather all the data available. You're going to ingest all the data into the Splunk, and the Splunk is going to give you a platform for you to query. That's basically the gist of Splunk, where it got started off with back in for 20 years back. But over a period of time, it's basically the Splunk is being used for a network operations guy, IT operations guy, even security operations guy, and it became an enterprise product. And the Splunk basically got multiple products into its portfolio added. Splunk Enterprise products, Splunk Enterprise Security. Splunk Enterprise Security is nothing but it's a SIEM, SIM, and Splunk SOAR. SOAR is nothing but a security orchestration, automation, and response. So based on these different products that they are offering, they become an enterprise product, and it becomes basically a prescriptive offering for a different customer use cases. Be it you're doing an attack analyzer, attack analyzation, or you are doing analyzation of behavior, user behavior analytics, or if you wanted to do a security essentials, or if you wanted to do a SOAR, they are basically offered as a prescriptive offerings. And you could make use of this data for an IT and an NOC operations or even a SOC operations. So basically, Splunk is providing a data lake where you can actually ingest the data from any kind of a platform with any scale so that you can query and get the data out of it. It could be used for event management. It's basically collect the events, process the events, store it in the DB, and you can basically query it using the correlation, and you can create the dashboards. On top of Splunk platform itself, you can add more products like a user behavior analytics, SIEM, or a SOAR. That's how it got evolved with. So now, if you look at this, look at the architecture of a Splunk, basically, the bottom one is called a Splunk platform. Most often, the Splunk guys are going to call this as a Splunk platform, Splunk core, or Splunk enterprise. Be it whatever it is, it's basically a Splunk enterprise platform wherein you are basically ingesting all the data into it. On top of it, you can add more products such as a Splunk Enterprise Security, which is nothing but your SIEMs, SIM, security information, uh, event management system. So on top of the SIM, basically you can add more products such as your SOAR or a user behavior analytics or a Splunk attack analyzers. The Splunk attack analyzer is basically a new one in their portfolio. The Splunk was offered on a SaaS service. Even you can install it on-prem. It's available for you to go with an evaluation one, which is going to be on a standalone box. So if you are a customer and if you want to explore a Splunk, you can basically install the Splunk on any platform like a cloud also it's available. Basically, you can use the Splunk, and if you really like it, you can actually expand the Splunk capabilities on top of each and everything. So based on these different products, they offer different applications for the different usage purposes. They have more than 2,800 applications in the Splunk base. So all the apps are going to be available under splunkbase.com so that you can download those apps, or you can even browse it straight away from the Splunk platform directly. So it's basically a data lake where you are ingesting all the data from your network, be it your switches, routers, wireless LAN controller, access points, firewalls, or even your NAC systems, Catalyst Center, your umbrella, everything you're ingesting the data into the Splunk. And all this data is going to be basically passed, put it into its DB, and you can basically make use of this data for querying purpose, real-time alerting purpose, or even you can create your own apps or a dashboards around it. It's offered as a SaaS or a self-managed like an on-prem itself. So that's the overview of Splunk. So don't think that the Splunk was offered only in the one Splunk platform or a Splunk product. Basically, it has a portfolio of different products. Now, with that, I wanted to actually ask you a question to start with a Slido question. This is my Slido first question. Which security information and event management SIEM system do you use? You can participate this Slido question by scanning the QR code available, or you can even actually, participate by the event code itself. So I'm going to give you some time for you to actually give me that results. Rigo, over to you.
Yes, thank you
We
so
have
much.
the results available.
Thank you so much, Pavan. So we are still waiting for some results to populate. So we do encourage all of you who are joining, and we do have our first result here. So Wazoo is our first one. Anybody else? We'd like to hear from you. Please go ahead and scan that QR code on your screen and Let us know which security information and event management system you are currently using. We would really love to know and hear from you. There we go. We got Splunk, we got QRadar, Syslog, got a few votes in. Azure Sentinel. QRadar and Splunk seem to be at the top right now, so I think those are doing quite good.
Good, good. That's good to know.
Yeah.
So it's basically, we wanted to understand whether you're making use of a Splunk as an SIEM itself or a Splunk platform core itself. So Splunk guys and even QRadar was offering the SIM in order to ingest the data. That's the basically SIM what it offers. Now with that, I wanted to get started off with a Splunk installation. Of course, the Splunk can be installed on your on-prem over Windows, Mac, and Linux flavors. But with the time constraint, I wanted to actually show you how do you install Splunk on the Windows first and then after Linux. So based on the different products available in the Splunk, their compatibility also varies. You could install a couple of products only on the Linux platform, but a couple of products can be installed on a Windows and a Linux platform. So you would have to watch out for those. Now, with that, I'm going to actually start demonstrating how do you install Splunk on a Windows platform. So basically, you get started off by going into the Splunk Enterprise. This is where your core, it's going to be called as core also sometimes. So I'm trying to download it. I logged in already and I'm trying to download it. This is plain Windows box, okay? This is a Windows 11 where I'm downloading a Splunk executable file. Once it gets downloaded, let's start off with an installation executed. So the first and foremost, check the license agreement. And I'm not going with the customization options. Basically, I'm going with a basic one, installation itself. And it's going to ask me to enter the username and the credentials. These credentials are going to be used for your web application access. So I'm going to go ahead and install the application. And it's going to take a couple of moments to get it installed. So once it gets installed, you can basically access it. It automatically opens up with a default browser over 8,000 port. So you might have to actually tweak your Windows firewall in order to allow this 8,000 port so that you can access this Splunk web UI from anywhere else. So for that, I'm adding an inbound rule, a new rule that I wanted to allow through port number. It's a TCP, HTTP 8,000 port is by default. And I wanted to allow the connection from all the firewall entities. And let's give it a name, allow 8,000 for Splunk. Let's finish it off now. We can access the Splunk from any other system now. So basically, you're presenting the credentials, what you have given during the installation visit, and then that's it. So you are ready to go. You have the application installed, Splunk Enterprise platform installed on the Windows platform. So you could make use of manage apps in order to find out what are the apps available by default. And these are the apps, basically 23 apps which are available. You can even browse the apps, or even you can actually install the app as well from the file that you were downloading, if at all the Splunk is not reachable from the external world. So let's go ahead and do this with a Linux machine also. So I got an Ubuntu version. So on this, I've already downloaded the tar file, and I'm going to actually unzip it using tar JDX VF into a specific folder called /opt. Okay, so I wanted to install all the Splunk application into the /opt folder. Okay, so now once after that, it's going to take a while for it to unzip everything and put it into that folder. Once done, let's move on to the initializing or starting this application or starting Splunk service. We're going to go into /opt Splunk bin Splunk. That's the service that you need to bring it up. So once you start with it, it's going to ask you to accept the license agreement. Once you have done that, it's going to ask you to enter the username and password. This username and password is going to be used for you to log into the Splunk web UI, just like you did on the Windows machine. So it's going to wait for the web services to up and running. Then once it is up and running, you can bring up the browser of your choice and then access the Splunk web application through web UI over 8000 port and enter the credentials what you have configured during the installation or starting up of a service. One thing you might have to note down is whenever this Ubuntu box getting restarted, you might have to start the service or you might have to add this as a startup service itself. That's one thing that you need to watch out for. Now, as similar to the Windows, it's basically you can install any app by finding the app into the browser, or you can even actually manage all the apps. You can even install the app from the application that you might be downloading it from the splunkbase.com. So straight away, you can actually browse the applications from this if at all your system is directly accessing the internet. If otherwise, you might have to download it and then install it from this way. So that's how basically it got started off with. Now let's dive into this integrations part. This is the first integration that we're going to talk about. Splunk for Cisco Identity Services Engine. So for this integration to work, you need two applications to be installed on this Splunk. One is called Splunk add-on for Cisco Identity Services Engine. It basically gathers the events from Cisco ISE and passes it and puts it into DB by adding a tag over it. So the Splunk add-on is basically doing all the duty. And on top of it, if you add the Splunk for Cisco Identity Services Engine app, that gives you the existing dashboards. So the dashboards are available in the first app, whereas add-on is basically to pass the events coming down from the Cisco ISE. So let's see how it works basically. So as an administrator on the ISE deployment, you're going to log into the PPAN primary policy administration node. You might be configuring anything, you might be changing the configuration, or you might be adding the configuration. All that configuration is going to get synced across all the nodes in your deployment for the end users and endpoints coming down to the network based on the defined policies or configuration that you have done. So the devices and users coming over the network via wired, wireless, or a VPN or a 5G network, they might be getting authenticated over a radius or a TCAT protocol on top of a AAA. Some of the endpoints might be making use of a profiling service, posture service, pxgrid, etc. So basically, they are getting authenticated against an identity store, external identity stores such as Active Directory or an Azure. You can give differentiated privileges based on the different VLANs, and you can enforce different privileges based on the VLANs, STT, ACLs, DACL, etc. So all these, if you look at it, whatever you're doing, an admin is trying to log into the PPAN, that's an event. An admin is trying to change something on the ISE, that's another event. A user is coming over the network and are getting authenticated. That's another event. So all these events are basically gathered from different systems like PPAN, SPAN, primary MNT, secondary MNT, including the statistics and the monitoring from available from the each and every node. It's going to be collected and sent to the primary monitoring node and secondary monitoring node through syslog. If you add an external syslog target also, that's when you can send these external syslogs not only to the primary MNT, secondary MNT, you could also actually send it over to the external log servers. So because we are talking about actually integrating Cisco ISE with a Splunk, we're going to replace this external log server with our Splunk. Now, with that in mind, how do I configure it? It's really 3 steps, but in fact, it's only 2 steps basically. So you might have to actually configure a logging target for the Cisco ISE to send the events to the logging target, or a Splunk in this case. The second one is to map the logging categories. The logging categories are nothing but the Cisco ISE was allowing you to send the syslogs in a categorical manner. What does it mean? Basically, all the past authentications are one category. Failed authentications are one category. Diagnostics is another category. Administrator logins are another category. Change configuration audit is another category. So based on what you are looking for, you might have to actually map this logging category to the logging target so that Cisco ISE is going to send those respective logging categories to the external logging server. In our case, it's Splunk. The third one, optionally, you can even configure the collection filters. The filter is nothing but to suppress the syslog being sent out to the external log server. Keep in mind, it's not only suppressing being sent to the external log server, it's also actually suppressing being sent out to the primary MNT and secondary MNT also. So that was the reason why it's completely optional one. Okay. Now let's move on to how do we integrate this? How do we make it happen? So let's start off with our looking at the Cisco ISE deployment. This is my lab setup where I have 6 nodes, 2 PAN, 2 MNT, 2 PSNs. And let's add a logging target by going into the logging, remote logging targets page. Now let's give it a name, Splunk underscore SIEM. And you can send the syslogs over UDP, TCP, or a secure syslog mechanism. It's up to you. Description is an optional one. I'm just adding it. Make sure it's in enabled state. And instead of making use of a host IP address over here, I'm going to make use of an IP address. The reason for this is whenever an event has to be forwarded to this Splunk external log target, it has to be resolved by asking the DNS. So DNS queries will be more when you add the host FQDN. So it's, of course, we have a DNS cache in order to actually overcome this problem. But just to avoid the burden on the Cisco ISE, I was making use of an IP address. The port, I'm going to make use of a 514 port by default. The facility code really doesn't matter for this case. But when you have multiple systems being sent, the syslogs being sent over to the Splunk, you can make use of different facility codes so that on this Splunk, using the facility code also, you can search the events. So that's how one of the example is if I have 2 different clusters, one ISE cluster was making use of only corporate access like wide and wireless VPN, and second cluster is being used for a device administration purpose. So if I wanted to send both the syslog information coming from these 2 different clusters to Splunk, I can make use of 2 different facility codes over here. So let's include the alarms also. Let's increase the length to a maximum limit 8192 because some of the events like radius accounting and the profiling information is going to be huge. So we don't want it to be chunked at the source side and the destination side. So let's enable the alarm so that you can also send the alarm information to the Splunk. Let's check this box called 3164 RFC, which is talking about no character in the syslog is being escaped. So with that, let's go ahead and submit the configuration. And basically, it's a warning. Are you really sure you want to make use of a TCP or a UDP instead of any secure mechanism? For the demonstration purpose, I'm going ahead. Now that we have added the remote logging target, we need to map the logging categories. So the logging categories are helping you to send only specific logs or a syslog information to this Splunk, such as failed attempts only, past authentications only. So for the demonstration purpose, I'm going to make use of all the logging categories to be mapped to the logging target Splunk. Just for an instance, I'm going to take a AAA audit. I'm adding Splunk so that Cisco ISE is going to send the AAA audit information to Splunk as well. This is how you're going to map the logging category to the logging target. Now you're going to do same thing for all other logging categories. I'm just fast forwarding it so in order to save the time. So once it is done, I just wanted to actually look for what are the Splunk target being used in the logging category. So these are the logging categories which I'm making use of for the collection filters. As I told you, it's an optional piece. Basically, it is to suppress the syslogs being sent out to the Splunk or external log server. But keep in mind, if you add any collection filters based on username, policy set, or anything, you are also actually suppressing on the MNT side as well. So you can apply filters like a filter all, only filter the past authentications alone. I don't want to send the past authentications coming down from so-and-so network. That's the kind of a use case. So just for an example, I'm going to make use of, let's say, a NAS IP address to start off with a 10.10.10. Whatever events coming from the NAS IP address 10.10, I don't want them to be transferred to the Splunk. So how do I actually install? So this is my new Splunk installation on the Windows box. So I'm trying to install an application, Cisco ISE application. Let's add it. Let's enable this checkbox. Whenever there is an update available, it automatically gets upgraded. And let's install a second app, which is necessary for Splunk to pass the log information being sent from the ISE. And once both the applications are installed on the Splunk platform, you can basically search it using ISE. Just make sure whether they got installed successfully or not. Yes, they got installed successfully. Now that we have configured both the systems, we have configured ISE, we have configured Splunk. Let's go ahead and move down to the adding the data. So how do I add the data to it? So it's basically you're starting to configure a UDP syslogs being sent out from the ISE to listen on the Splunk, basically. So on the Splunk, you are configuring a data listener over the UDP channel on the port number 5 and 4. The source type should be Cisco ISE syslog, and the host is supposed to be with an IP address. That's it. That's simple as it is. So you configured a Splunk and you configured a Cisco ISE, and now let's initiate some events. Something like I wanted to actually get authenticated using an Ubuntu. And this Ubuntu box, I'm trying to log in. And this Ubuntu box is going through the .1x authentication. Once after the .1x authentication is successful, it's going through the posture service. So Let's move on to the Red Hat as well. Even this Red Hat box is actually going through the .1x authentication. Once the authentication is successful, it's going to actually go through the compliance posture service. Now let's move on to the Windows box, which is actually joined to the domain controller itself. So the ISE posture service have gone through it. And this is how basically I created events. And I got a couple of endpoints coming out the network over wireless as well. So it was connected to the network. And on the Cisco ISE, let's switch over to the ISE and look at the live log. So you've seen how these Ubuntu, Red Hat, and Windows box basically going through the authentication and the posture service. And I got a couple of other endpoints that are also actually participating in the Cisco ISE services. Okay, now that we got the events, let's move over to Splunk and see what it is showing me. So by default, when you access the Splunk Cisco ISE app, it is gonna already has all the dashboards installed on it. So you don't have to actually create any dashboards. It has ISE overview, past authentication, failed authentication, device summary, posture, compliance, client provisioning. All the dashboards are already readily available for you. So it's basically just sending the syslogs, relevant syslogs to the Splunk so that you can visualize the data. By default, you're going to land onto this summary view with the last 60 minutes of interval. You can even actually go up to last 4 hours, 24 hours. Even you can start looking at the events by last 7 days, last 30 days, last month, last year. This is the one of the differentiating factor from Cisco ISE to the Splunk. The Splunk can be actually ingested with any kind of a data at a mass scale or at any scale. So that was the reason why you can keep more data and more data on the Splunk itself. This is one of the advantages that you're going to gain. And you got all the ICE events showing with, let's go over the last 60 minutes just to increase the events. And you can see that there is an ID connector, configuration changes, external past authentication, passive ID, so on and so forth. There are so many events actually showing up, and it was showing me in beautifully already. And it was also showing me how the users are getting authenticated from a different locations point of view too. And it was also showing me the top alarms available, the authentication, the top alarms, and the authentication summary like authentication succeeded versus passed. You can go over to the system health where it was already gathering the system health information from all the Cisco's ISE deployment, be it your CPU utilization, memory utilization, disk space available. You can even actually go back to last 24 hours in order to understand more. It automatically modifies the dashboards accordingly. And you have a ICE alarms beautifully shown, critical versus info, and how many critical events are actually showing me in the last 60 minutes. You don't have to actually worry about showing all the events. I can only concentrate on the last 60 minutes. What are the critical events available? So that's how I can gain more events. So you can even go to the ICE profiling. What are the different endpoints coming up with the different profiles from different locations? ICE past authentications from different locations, wired versus wireless, even via VPN users. There is VPN user, different locations coming from a different location standpoint. You have a failed authentication, guest authentications as well. So I got one guest user onboarded. So it was showing me all the results available. You can even see the compliance information coming from a different location standpoint, compliant versus non-compliant users, users by location, etc. So that's the beautiful nature of it. But you might have to actually look at this Splunk validated architecture. The reason behind that is this syslogs being sent from a Cisco ISE to Splunk is over UDP. So gathering the syslog information over UDP or a TCP, there is a validated architecture available in this Splunk. So you might have to look from that standpoint. You might have to actually forward it to a listener, and that forwarder is going to forward it to this Splunk accordingly. So you might have to actually consider these architecture based on your enterprise network. Now, what exactly this Splunk value addition? The Cisco ISE was already having live log events, and even you have a log analytics, everything available on the Cisco ISE itself. But what is the value addition by adding the Splunk to the Cisco ISE? It's basically Splunk is basically a data lake. You are ingesting the data to the Splunk from your network elements, such as switches, routers, firewall, even your Catalyst Center, ISE, your SD-WAN, etc. So Splunk is becoming a data lake, and you can even query based on the data available on the Splunk. So as much as data that you are ingesting, you are able to actually create your own eventing management on the Splunk itself. But that's the beauty of SIEM is, right? So I what exactly not available on the ISE and what is available on the Splunk? That's what I wanted to start off with. But to start off with, I can search the data available on the Splunk by going here. And as a layman person, even I need to start off with somewhere. We know Cisco ISE is actually sending the log information, syslog information over a UDP port, right? So let's start by searching using the source UDP port itself. So I wanted to actually start by showing the events which are coming over the UDP port 514. So there are around 1,747 events coming from last 24 hours on 24 hours on the UDP port 514. I also have another Cisco ISE cluster which is sending the syslog information over UDP port 515. So I got two different systems actually showing me different events. And collectively, if you look at it, you got more than 31,335 events to be precise. You got those many events shown up in the last 24 hours. Okay. Now, Splunk was already in parsing this data. You can basically filter the data based on these attributes: message class, source IP, severity, server type, anything. All these are readily available. So if you look at one of the example like event type, the event type is going to actually show me the Cisco ISE events, Cisco ISE authentication, Cisco past authentication, failed authentication, etc. So if I wanted to search based on the Cisco ISE authentications alone, it filters down to the 402 events alone. So that's how I can basically filter down to. And even now, if you look at within the Cisco ISE authentication itself, the event type shows me past authentication, failed authentication, guest authentication failed, guest authentication failed attempts, etc. So I wanted to search, filter all the events coming with any of these event type. And then after, on top of this, I wanted to add a message class based on the message class. The message class is basically, I wanted to know whether how many of them past authentications are there and how many of them are failed authentication. So the message class, based on the message class, I can add filters like message class failed attempts or a message class past authentications. This will show me the events with the past and failed attempts alone. So out of 404 available events earlier, now I got over 372 events alone. Now I wanted to actually do this by stats. So I wanted to beautifully say how many past authentication versus failed authentications. So that you're going to do it using the command called stats count by message, stats count by. So there are 8 failed attempts and there are 364 past authentications. That's so beautifully. If I like this, I can straight away add it. Or if I wanted to do a visualization around it, by default, Splunk was giving me on the column chat. If I wanted to portray this in the pie chart, I can do that. And now that I really like this pie chart, I'm going to go ahead and save it into existing dashboard called ISE Past Authentication Summary. Past Authentication Summary. So let's give the panel a name, past authentication versus failed authentications. Let's save this panel using the pie chart itself. And let's go to that dashboard straight away. If you now look at it, there is one more panel got added, past versus failed authentication. This is how you're going to start by searching your data. This is basically a stepping stone for you to start searching it. Now, let's take a second use case where I wanted to actually look at all the events coming over UDP 515 port plus a TLS version. What are the endpoints getting authenticated using the TLS version? Now, which TLS version? So I wanted to start off with Cisco ISE events, and then so TLS version is an attribute that you can basically filter on. Any TLS version that it was going through, show me that. So there are around all these events are actually participating in the TLS authentication standpoint. Now, let's start by portraying this over the time series graph or a time chart. So it's going to beautifully show me all the events on the time series chart. There is TLS 1.2 and TLS 1.3. Basically, your organization basically making use of TLS 1.2 and 1.3. If at all I wanted to suppress all TLS 1.2, I need to remediate. But basically, this is not my idea. I wanted to actually understand how many endpoints getting authenticated using TLS 1.2, how many endpoints are getting authenticated using TLS 1.3. For that, I'm going to start by adding more filters by calling station ID. If you look at that, there is one thing called calling station ID. So I'm going to add calling station ID and the TLS cipher also to it. And let me just a little forward it so that you'll understand. So I'm adding calling station ID and TLS cipher to the query to filter out the events. And now I'm going to add the stats count by so beautifully how it's going to show me. So all these endpoints, each device MAC address going through which version and which cipher. So as a security advocate, you might be wondering how many endpoints are actually making use of a weak cipher versus strong ciphers. How many endpoints are making use of TLS 1.2 versus 10.3. So I really like this data. So I'm going to actually put it in, save it into the existing dashboard. So let's add it into the dashboard, go over that. So the panel got added into my dashboard now. So let's take another one wherein let's go into the app itself straight away, Cisco ISE app. If you are looking for a BYOD events or an MDA events or a tax events, basically they are missing over here. So what if I wanted to actually start building the dashboard for me? So for that, I can basically, I'm going to just fast forward it just for the sake of convenience. So this is the query. All the BYOD endpoints are going to be registered. We know that all the BYOD endpoints are going to be onboarded and registered into the registered devices endpoint identity group. So I wanted to know how many endpoints are actually registered over the BYOD service. So there is only one endpoint which I onboarded for the last 24 hours, and I like this data, and I'm going to share. The next use case is basically I wanted to start by searching the MDM events. So how many MDM endpoints are actually coming down on the network? How many of them are compliant versus non-compliant? So you can actually start by looking at the MDM class, message class equal to MDM. You can filter out all the events targeted only for a MDM message class. You can start adding the MDM compliance status as well as the calling station ID so that you know how many endpoints are actually participating in the compliance. So there is only two endpoints. Both of them are non-compliant at this point of time. So I like this data and I'm going to actually add it into the dashboard. And the last use case that I wanted to show is how many devices are connecting over different SSIDs. In my organization, I have two SSIDs. One is a corporate SSID, another one is a open SSID for a guest authentication. So I wanted to actually filter out the endpoints connecting over different SSIDs. I have two SSIDs. One is a .employee, .employee -map. .employee is for corporate use case. .employee -map is for guest use case purpose. So how many endpoints getting associated to them is what actually I want to do. So this is how you're going to build the query. And if at all you're not able to see any report available on the ISE, you can create the reports straight away from the Splunk. Now with that, let's come down to the second integration. What do we call it as Cisco Enterprise Networking for Splunk Platform App? Oh, really, such a big name. Now, in an enterprise, what usually happens? You got devices, wireless devices, IoT devices, headless devices. All these devices are coming over the network via wired, wireless VPN or a 5G. They're getting connected, and some laptop or workstations might be accessing all this. Might be in one branch, and different branches are being connected via WAN link, and this WAN is being managed via an SD-WAN, let's say. So all these devices access being governed by the Cisco ISE, you know that. And whereas Catalyst Center is going to manage with the integration of Cisco ISE, you can actually give a differentiated privileges. You can also actually segment the network using the TrustSec, and you can also manage your network devices as well. Whereas your branches connected over the WAN network being managed via SD-WAN. So you got these three elements in your Cisco Enterprise Network, apart from the you got the firewall, switches, routers, everything. So all this data being ingested, when you integrate with the Splunk, you basically going to get all the events in your enterprise network. That is the reason why the app was called as Cisco Enterprise Networking for Splunk Platform App. Okay. Now, again, for this integration to work, you need two applications. I'm not going to show you how do you install these two applications because basically you have to download them via app, or you can browse them straight away from the Splunk platform app and install it. Now let's consider that those two applications were already installed. Let's go ahead and go to the Splunk Enterprise Networking app. This is basically shows you the events coming across your enterprise network. Uh, the enterprise network is contained with the firewall, Cisco ISE, Catalyst Center, any events, your SD-WAN. All the events are going to be gathered and are going to be shown. So if you are looking for only the Cisco ISE relevant events, you can basically click on that so that your panels are going to be adjusted accordingly. Your dashboard is going to be adjusted accordingly. So that's how the capability of this Splunk app is. Your network insights, security insights are going to be gathered from the Catalyst Center and SD-WAN side. SD-WAN side. Event and incident viewer is going to be gathered from all three, SD-WAN, ISE, and the Catalyst Center, so on and so forth. But what is the advantage by having this events in the Splunk app? Let's take a use case. Pawan got connected to the network and he was trying to access one of the application in one of the branch. So it's basically he got authenticated, he got connected, but it seems that he was not able to access that application. So he created a case in order for the NOC or an SOC guy or an IT operations guy to look into it. So as an IT operations guy, how do I troubleshoot by taking this up, by taking up this case? So this overview, the Splunk app overview is going to show me all the events gathered from all these three elements. Now, the first one is going to show me the top 10 threats in the last so-and-so time. And it also shows me the policy hits on the SD-WAN side as well as on the ISE side. And you got also the active issues currently happening, categorize them into the P1, P2 so that as an IT administrator, I can actually go into it. And if you look at the client health summary being reported from the Catalyst Center, it looks to be healthy. So nothing surprising. Basically, there is no events or there is no health problem from the Catalyst Center. So let's dive more into it. Let's go into the devices panel and understand it. So this device dashboard is going to show you the client inventory information over wired, wireless, profiling information, BYOD information, guest endpoints, and all the device inventory. You can basically search on any element over here based on the device IP, based on username, based on NAS port IP, etc. So one of the user called Alfred, he was already getting associated to WLC1 with the two devices, iPhone and Workstation. It seems he was reporting the problem from this user. Okay, let's start looking at the network insights, wherein you can actually dive into how is your switches or WLCs functioning. So it seems the WLC is reachable where he got connected his device, and it's been up and running for the last 25 days, and the health score, it seems to be good as well. So there is no problem that was actually showing me up. So let's go into the security insights and understand it. Now, the security insights are going to show you the malware uh, coming from different endpoints. If you go a little bit down, you would understand there are events basically being dropped by your firewall. So this firewall, it seems basically Alfred was being denied with an application because he was enforced with a quarantine device drop. So his device being quarantined, that was the reason why he was not able to access that application. This is how basically we will ask the end user to remediate his system so that he can actually get the application access back. So that's how it helps you in your organization. Let's come down to the third integration, what is called the Splunk DB Connect app. Um, and as an administrator, you're going to actually configure everything by logging into the PPAN, and the configuration is getting synced up across your ISE deployment. All your devices are being authenticated against your PSNs, right? This we know already. But what if I wanted to actually gather not only syslog information? So far, we have seen only the syslogs being gathered from the ISE, right? So instead of that, instead of making use of a UDP or a TCP mechanism, is there any other method? So the data connect is going to give you a capability to connect straight away to the SMNT. That's a preferred one. By default, it's going to listen on the secondary MNT if at all available. When you enable the data connect. Over the data connect, you can basically connect any of your tools like Splunk, Java, Python, Oracle, Excel, DB Visualizer, anything over this data connect so that you can query not only the operational data, you can also gather the configuration data also. So with that, basically you are querying it straight away by logging into the ISE and then querying it and getting the information and showing it the report. So for this app to work again, you need two applications again. One is a DB Connect, another one is an Oracle JDBC. So let's see how it works. Let's start by looking at our ISE deployment again. So you have 6 nodes, 2 PAN nodes, 2 MNT nodes, and 2 PSN nodes. And precisely, I got an ISE node 24, which is acting like a secondary monitoring node service. So this is where it's going to basically, I'm going to enable the data connect. I've already enabled the data connect. It's already enabled. You're going to use these details like username, host name or an IP address, port number, service name, and the password in order to connect it to the ISE DB to the secondary MNT. How do I do that? I'm going to skip how you install the applications. I'm going to straight away jump on to considering that I have already installed the applications. I got this Splunk DB Connect app. Everything is up and running. So now that I got 2 applications installed, let's start by going into the Splunk DB Connect app. If you look at the data lab by inputs or outputs, it's nothing available. So let's configure it from the scratch. So we need an identity in order to connect it to the database, Cisco ISE database. So let's create an identity, basic identity. Let's give it the credentials. It's a name that with which you are going to connect with. Data connect is the username. By default is going to be used for a data connect. The password is nothing but whatever you set on the Cisco ISE. Save the identity, and you're going to create a connection. The connection is nothing but how do you connect it to the Cisco ISE. So I'm going to connect to ISE node 24 over the data connect. So I'm just naming it. I'm going to make use of this data connect credentials that I configured just now over what? Oracle, a JDBC connection. And the host name, you can basically edit the JDBC or you can provide the host name information straight away. So I wanted to edit the JDBC. So if you look at the JDBC URL, I'm connecting to this ISE node 24, which is nothing but a secondary MNT node over 2484. We're using the CPM 10 service. For me to connect to the ISE database, I need a Cisco ISE certificate also. So let's go to the ISE, go to the Cisco ISE node 24, secondary monitoring node, export it, only the certificate, public key is needed, no private key is needed. Let's copy that certificate and let's switch over to Splunk and paste that information in the certificate window. That's it. You don't require anything else. And save the configuration. Now you got an identity with which you are getting connected. You got a connection through which you are basically able to connect to the DB, and you can use these two in order to build the queries. So let's start by building the query by clicking on the new input. So you might be having multiple connections, but in my case, I have only one single connection that I'm going to use per. So straight away, it's going to connect it to the DB, and you can basically put down the query, execute the query first of all, whether it is successful or not. Once it is successful, then only you can actually move on by adding to it. So this query is basically for me to show the past versus failed authentications. So if I really like this query, I'm going to actually add this as one of the query, past versus failed authentications. The execution frequency, you can set it to any seconds, minutes, etc. I want it to be reviewed for every 60 seconds. And the source type should be custom, or you can actually put it into Cisco ISE log itself. You can, that's a tagging purpose. It's for tagging and filtering purposes. So you can finish it. Later point of time, if you are having more and more data ingested into it, you need to segregate how are you feeding the data into it. So let's look at the details. So these are the details available, basically passed versus failed authentication. Let's build one more query. It's something like how many authentications are happening from a different locations. And if you queried, this is basically past authentication versus fail from a different location standpoint. The third query is from a different devices standpoint. How many endpoints are coming over different devices? From switch, there are 33. From WLC, it's 8. From VPN, it's 3. So I like this. That's how you're going to start adding it. So this is an operational data so far. If I'm looking for a configuration data, the configuration data such as endpoint data, it could be a policy sets. So if I wanted to understand how many policy sets are available, you can straight away search this data connect schema so that it queries and shows you the information. So it seems I have got so much policy sets, but I wanted to understand what are the policy sets and policy set name available. So I wanted to just show the policy set name and policy set status. Execute the query like this, and I'm going to save it. So this is how you're basically increasing the data events on the Splunk further, so that you're not only digesting over UDP, you're digesting from the ingesting from the network, and even you are directly querying from the ISE database straight away. So you can also actually look how your connection is working, because you're every 60 seconds you are basically getting connected and you're querying the DB, right? So you need to understand is, are there any errors around it? For that purpose, you have a Splunk DB Connect health dashboard, which shows you whether you got encountered with any errors or not. Okay, so that's the third integration part. Now let's come down to the fourth and last integration, which is nothing but a Splunk SOAR. SOAR is nothing but security orchestration, automation, and response. As I was telling you, the Splunk on top of Splunk platform, Splunk Enterprise or Splunk Core, you're basically installing in a SIEM, or you are installing a Splunk Enterprise security like SOAR app, etc. The SOAR is to actually gather the information from different elements, and then you might have to automate the repeated ones, or you might have to take an action on the something like malicious devices. So you're going to feed the data from different elements like firewall, IDS, IPS, endpoint, your forensics, etc., to SIEM. And or you might be ingesting the data to Hadoop, or you might be ingesting the data to threat intel platform. It's basically a data. You are ingesting all this information so that you can actually do analytics using this SIEM or Hadoop or any data platform. And then after, you can make a decisions whether to actually take any action or remediation actions or event management. So, but SOAR, where Splunk SOAR comes into play, you're basically the SIEM is nothing but the Splunk SOAR. It's going to automate your responses. Instead of actually going through a manual process, you can take the actions in an automated way so that you can actually quarantine the system, for example. So just for your context, not all the applications available in the Splunk base is not a SOAR app. Precisely what we need is a SOAR applications which can give us the events through which you can take the actions around it. So if I search the Splunk base using the SOAR applications alone, it's going to list down these applications: Cisco ISE, Cisco ISE, Umbrella, Firewall, Firepower, WebEx, even FireApp. Using this, basically, you are able to create your Splunk SOAR, a playbook. Now, Cisco ISE, if I'm interested in Cisco ISE itself, because our webinar is around how do we integrate Cisco ISE with a Splunk. If you look at the Cisco ISE app itself, which is compatible with a Splunk SOAR, it's going to show you all the applications. Down the bottom, you have the supported actions available. You can apply the policy, you can query the endpoints, you can clear the policies, you can actually terminate the endpoints, so on and so forth. So with that, we come down to the last poll question. I wanted to understand which security orchestration, automation, and response tool that you are making use of in your organization. So which security orchestration, automation, and response SOAR tools do you use? I'm going to give you some time for you to actually input your data.
Yep. Thank
Be
you,
good.
Pavan.
Yep.
Yep. Thank you, Pavan. Yeah. So the poll is now live. So we just want to find out from you all which security orchestration, automation, and response tools do you use? Feel free to scan that QR code for Slido if you haven't done so already and submit your answers. We'd love to hear from you and what you're currently using. I see that we've already got Unit 42 and third party. Looking for more. We got manual coming in. Let's see. Keep them coming, folks. We'd like to hear from you. Google Chronicle.
Great.
Nice.
Google Chronicle. Oh, that's a good one. Okay. So with that, I wanted to actually do a demonstration also. So let's dive into the demo. Thanks for your results. Thanks for your answers over there. Let's dive into the demonstration part of it. So I wanted to actually show you how do I actually take an action on let's take a use case. A user is getting authenticated and he was associated to a tier 2 or a tier 1 based on the policy and based on the credentials that he was using. And if at all it was being infected, how do you automate, or how do you take an action from the Splunk itself by looking at that, whether it is a threat associated to it or not? So I'm going to start by showing you ISE policies, first of all. The policy sets. This is a different ISE cluster altogether. I got a remote access VPN policy set, which was actually associated only with a virtual, that means VPN users. So I got a tier 1 users, tier 2 users, both of them getting permit access, but look at the security group. Security group is the way that I'm differentiating the segmentation for these two users. So even though I'm giving a permit access, I'm actually differentiating the access privileges using the Splunk security groups. But whereas I got the global exceptions, wherein ANC investigate, as long as your adaptive network control is associated with these policies, I'm trying to give them a different access. In just investigate underscore access profile, quarantine system security group. If at all the policy got applied with the nuke from orbit or PXQ radar shutdown, then I'm going to give deny access right away without associating any security group to it. That's my policies around it. So let's look at those policies, adaptive network control policies. You got different policies basically with the different actions. So you might have to actually note down the policy names in order to actually initiate the action on this Splunk SOAR app. Okay, so you got different policies with the different actions. If I wanted to quarantine, use this policy. If I wanted to shut down, use this policy. If I wanted to do a port bounce, use this policy. That's how it is. So I'm going to move over to ISE live log. There is no live log currently. There is no endpoint connected to it currently. I'm going to move over to the endpoint. I'm going to give the credentials. It got connected successfully. Let's take a look at whether it got authenticated or not. Yes, it got authenticated, and it's a tier 2 user, an employee user. Remember the endpoint ID and an IP address. Let's look at the authorization profile associated to it. So because it's a tier 2 policy that is getting matched, it should be associated with a different, with the same permit access, but with a different security group. So let's understand whether what security group was associated to this user as well. Now I got a type 2 security group user too. Now, if you go to the Splunk SOAR, this is the Splunk SOAR. By default, you're landing on this page, home page. Let's go to source and new events, which is going to show you all the latest sessions available. ISE session listing is what it's going to show you all the sessions information latest. And because this is only one single endpoint got authenticated currently, let's wait for so this is the endpoint MAC address and this is the IP address, which was gathered by querying it and gathering the information. So now if I wanted to apply a policy, let's say understand that this endpoint is actually got quarantine, need to quarantine because of maliciousness. Now I can apply the policy by running any of these actions like investigate, generate, contain, correct, etc. So you can apply the policy by copy pasting that policy name. Remember the policy name associated to it. And you can associate an IP or a MAC address. Anything is fine. So the ANC action can be performed on the IP or a MAC address. I'm currently doing on the MAC address. Now that it got applied, the pxgrid QRadar quarantine policy got applied successfully. Now let's switch over to the ISE live log. If you look at it, there is a COA happened and it already enforced with a different authorization profile and a security group. So it's being quarantined right now. So now that the COA got initiated, the end user has to perform the authentication again by submitting the credentials. Once after the submitting the credentials, if you look at it, it's basically you got associated with an investigated underscore authorization access and a quarantine group. Now, if you go to the endpoint assignment, remember the MAC address was associated to it. Now, if you wanted to clear it again, go to the run action. This I'm doing it manually, clearing it or applying the policy. You can do it automatically by using a playbook. Okay. So the endpoint associated to that policy was cleared off now. So that now the endpoint, if at all it got authenticated again, it's going to gain the tier 1 access after remediation. So it started. If I go to the live log, now he got the tier 2 user permit access again back. So that's how basically you can take an ANC action by looking at all the events gathered from the different systems. On the Splunk SOAR, you can create a playbook in order to create an action or an event manager. So that's the fourth integration. With that, we come to an end. And these are the sources available. Especially, I want you to concentrate on the fourth one, ISE and Splunk integration. It's available cs.co/ISE-berg #Splunk. It will take you to all the integration that I was showing you now. With that, any questions, Rigo, outstanding questions that I need to take care?
Yeah, first, I just want to say excellent presentation, Pavan. That was great. As far as questions, I was looking at our Slido window here, and I don't see any outstanding questions remaining. Our panelists were able to address all of them for our audience today. So I think we're good to wrap up the presentation for today.
Thank you.
Um,
Thanks a lot, folks. Sorry for the delay.
No, no, all good. Thank you so much, Pavan. Once again, really appreciate you speaking about this topic with our audience today. I hope that everyone found great value in the information and resources that were shared here. I would also like to extend a very big thank you to each and every one of our panelists for lending a hand with all of the questions throughout the event. We really appreciate it. And for our attendees, if you do have any additional questions or would like to continue the conversation about today's ICE topic, we do encourage you to participate in our online post-webinar discussion. The link to that discussion post is available on your Slido screen on the left-hand side, where you can access a handful of additional ICE resources that we'll share here in this event as well. And a quick reminder that our short survey is now live on Slido, and we would be so grateful if you can just take a few minutes to complete it and let us know how you like today's presentation. We always look forward to receiving your valuable feedback. And for those who are interested in revisiting this session, we will have the recording available on demand within about 5 business days after today. And the link to that is also available on your Slido resources for your reference as well. So feel free to save it or bookmark it and refer to it to any of those resources at any time. If you'd like. And one last quick reminder about our next event. So next month, we're going to be kicking off the year with ISE as Common Policy Context Hub. That's going to be on Thursday, January 9th. And again, the registration link is available on your Slido screen. So feel free to register at your earliest convenience if you haven't done so already. We look forward to seeing you all there for the next ISE event. So once again, I just want to thank our presenter Pavan, our panelists, and all of our attendees for joining us live. We wish you all a prosperous new year and look forward to seeing you back for more great ICE content in 2025. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next year.